Purpose of maximum security prisons. Maximum security prisons serve a critical role in the criminal justice system, particularly in a country like Singapore, where law and order are strictly enforced. These facilities are designed to house individuals who pose the highest risk to society. Those convicted of severe crimes such as violent offenses, organized crime, large-scale drug trafficking, and acts of terrorism. The primary goal of such institutions is not just to confine these individuals, but to ensure that they are unable to continue their criminal activities while incarcerated. Singapore's maximum security prisons operate under the philosophy that incarceration should be a combination of strict discipline and structured rehabilitation. Unlike lower security prisons, where inmates may have more freedom to move within the facility and engage in social interactions, maximum security prisons enforce stringent control measures. Inmates are under constant surveillance. Movements are heavily restricted, and direct human contact is minimized to prevent conflicts, escape attempts, or the formation of criminal networks within the facility. Beyond security, these prisons also serve as a deterrent. Singapore's reputation for having one of the lowest crime rates in the world is partly due to its unforgiving stance on crime and its high incarceration standards. The harsh reality of life inside these prisons sends a strong message to both convicted criminals and potential offenders. Crime does not pay. The certainty of severe consequences discourages individuals from engaging in unlawful activities. However, despite the tough conditions, Singapore's penal system also incorporates elements of reform. Authorities recognize that simply locking individuals away without offering a path to rehabilitation does little to address the root causes of criminal behavior. As such, maximum security prisons also integrate structured rehabilitation programs that aim to reshape the mindsets of inmates. These programs focus on psychological counseling, education, vocational training, and reintegration efforts to ensure that those who are eventually released have the opportunity to lead law-abiding lives. In addition, these facilities are designed to prevent any form of external criminal influence. Unlike in some countries where criminal organizations continue to operate from behind bars, Singapore's maximum security prisons take extreme measures to cut off any communication between inmates and their former criminal networks. All correspondence is strictly monitored, visits are controlled, and access to electronic devices is highly restricted to prevent illegal activities from continuing. Another crucial aspect of these prisons is their role in ensuring national security. High-profile criminals, including those involved in organized crime or extremist activities, are kept under tight control to prevent any form of radicalization, violent uprisings, or external influence that could destabilize public order. Prison authorities employ advanced surveillance technologies, strict protocols, and highly trained personnel to maintain order and ensure that inmates comply with prison regulations at all times. Ultimately, maximum security prisons in Singapore symbolize the country's commitment to justice, security, and rehabilitation. They are designed not only to isolate dangerous individuals from society, but also to provide a controlled environment where inmates have the opportunity, if they choose, to reflect on their actions and make positive changes. The balance between stringent discipline and structured rehabilitation defines Singapore's unique approach to criminal justice, ensuring that safety and order remain the top priorities. Daily life of inmates. Life inside Singapore's maximum security prison is one of strict routine, discipline, and constant surveillance. Unlike lower security prisons where inmates might have more privileges, those in maximum security facilities live under highly controlled conditions, with every aspect of their day planned and monitored. The prison system is designed to minimize risk, prevent conflicts, and ensure that inmates are kept in an environment that prioritizes security and rehabilitation. Daily schedule and routine. A typical day for an inmate in Singapore's maximum security prison starts early in the morning, often before sunrise. Inmates are awakened at a fixed time and must immediately begin their morning routine. Hygiene is a priority, and they are required to clean themselves and their cells under strict supervision. Personal items are limited, and each inmate is provided with only the bare necessities, basic toiletries, a prison uniform, and a small number of approved items such as books or religious materials. Breakfast is served in individual cells or a communal but highly controlled setting. Meals are simple, nutritious, and planned according to strict dietary guidelines. There are no luxuries, and food is designed to meet basic health requirements rather than comfort or preference. After breakfast, inmates are assigned different activities depending on their rehabilitation programs, security clearance, and individual circumstances. Those involved in vocational training or work programs may be escorted to designated areas where they engage in tasks such as carpentry, tailoring, or other forms of productive labor. However, these work opportunities are limited for high-risk inmates, who may spend most of their time in isolation or under close supervision. Education is another key part of the daily routine. Some inmates participate in literacy programs, basic education courses, or vocational training to develop skills that might help them reintegrate into society upon release. Inmates who are considered highly dangerous or a flight risk may not have access to these programs and instead spend most of their time in their cells. Cell conditions and isolation. The cells in maximum security prisons are small, functional, and designed for security rather than comfort. Most cells are single occupancy to prevent conflicts and ensure better monitoring. The walls are plain, and furniture is minimal, usually just a bed, a small desk, and a toilet. Inmates are not allowed personal decorations or excessive belongings. For those considered high-risk, confinement is even stricter. Some inmates spend up to 23 hours a day in their cells, with only a short period allocated for exercise or social interaction under close supervision. This level of isolation can have a significant psychological impact, often leading to stress, anxiety, or depression. However, prison officials conduct regular mental health assessments and offer counseling where necessary. Security and surveillance. Every movement within the prison is closely monitored. Inmates are under 24/7 surveillance through a combination of CCTV cameras, motion sensors, and direct supervision by prison officers. There is no privacy. Every action is observed to prevent violence, smuggling, or escape attempts. Interactions between inmates are carefully controlled. Some are allowed limited socialization during meal times or work programs, but any sign of aggression or misconduct is met with immediate disciplinary action. For those in solitary confinement or high-risk categories, even brief human interaction is restricted to controlled meetings with prison staff, psychologists, or legal representatives. Exercise and recreation. Physical activity is a regulated but necessary part of the daily schedule. Inmates are given a short, designated period to exercise, usually in a small, enclosed yard under strict supervision. This is essential for maintaining physical health and reducing the psychological effects of confinement. However, exercise time is strictly controlled, and there are no recreational sports or team activities that might lead to conflicts. Reading and self-reflection are encouraged. Inmates may have access to a limited selection of books, often related to personal development, education, or religious teachings. Access to television, radio, or the internet is either highly restricted or completely prohibited to prevent external influence or communication with criminal networks outside the prison. Visitation and communication. One of the most challenging aspects of life in maximum security prison is the restriction on communication with the outside world. Visitation rights are highly controlled, and only immediate family members or legal representatives are allowed to visit. Even then, visits occur under strict supervision, often with a glass barrier separating the inmate from the visitor. Conversations are monitored, and any attempt to pass messages or contraband is met with severe consequences. Phone calls, if permitted, are brief, recorded, and conducted under strict rules. Letters are also screened to prevent the transmission of coded messages or unauthorized communication. The goal is to ensure that inmates remain isolated from criminal influences while still maintaining minimal contact with their families for emotional support. Psychological impact. The rigid structure and isolation of maximum security prison life take a toll on the mental and emotional well-being of inmates. Many struggle with loneliness, anxiety, or depression due to the lack of social interaction and stimulation. To address this, prison officials implement mental health programs, including counseling and psychological evaluations. However, the effectiveness of these programs depends on the willingness of inmates to participate and engage in rehabilitation efforts. For some, the strict routine provides a sense of stability and discipline, especially for those who have lived chaotic lives before incarceration. But for others, the monotony and isolation can lead to long-term psychological distress. This is why Singapore's prison system places emphasis on structured rehabilitation programs, ensuring that inmates have at least some opportunity for personal growth and mental well-being, even within the confines of a high-security environment. Security measures in Singapore's maximum security prisons. Security is the foundation of Singapore's maximum security prisons, where the country's most dangerous criminals are housed. Every aspect of these facilities is designed to prevent escapes, violence, smuggling, and external criminal influence. Singapore is known for its efficiency and technological advancements, and these elements are fully integrated into its prison security system. The combination of strict policies, advanced surveillance, and highly trained personnel ensures that the prison operates with maximum control and minimal risk. Surveillance and monitoring. Singapore's maximum security prisons are equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance technology. High-definition CCTV cameras cover every corridor, cell, common area, and perimeter fence. These cameras operate 24/7 and are monitored in real time by prison officers in a central control room. Inmates are constantly observed, leaving no room for unauthorized activities. Apart from visual surveillance, motion sensors and infrared detectors are placed in strategic locations to detect any unusual movement. These sensors trigger alarms if an inmate attempts to move into a restricted area, tamper with their cell, or engage in suspicious behavior. In addition to electronic surveillance, officers conduct routine inspections at unpredictable times. Cells are searched regularly for contraband, and inmates are frequently checked to ensure compliance with prison rules. Biometric security and restricted access. Entry and exit points within the prison are controlled by biometric security systems. Officers and authorized personnel must pass fingerprint scans, retina scans, or facial recognition systems to access restricted areas. This prevents unauthorized access and ensures that only designated staff members can enter highly sensitive zones such as the control room, solitary confinement units, or high-risk prisoner sections. For inmates, biometric identification is also used to track their movements within the facility. Whether it is attending rehabilitation programs, moving to exercise areas, or receiving visitors, every action is logged and monitored to ensure full control over their whereabouts. Cell and facility design for maximum security. The very architecture of the prison is designed to prevent escapes and maintain tight control over inmates. The walls are made of reinforced concrete, resistant to drilling or tampering. Doors are heavy, made of solid steel, and equipped with automated locking mechanisms controlled from a central security station. Cells are small and minimally furnished, reducing the chances of inmates finding tools or objects that could be used as weapons. Windows are narrow and made with unbreakable glass, positioned high enough to prevent any attempt at escape. The layout of the prison is also designed to minimize contact between inmates, especially those classified as high risk or known to be involved in organized crime. In some cases, the facility is divided into different blocks, with inmates moved through secured passageways one at a time to prevent communication or coordination among prisoners. Strict regulations on inmate movement. In maximum security prisons, every movement of an inmate is carefully controlled. Unlike lower security facilities where prisoners may move in groups, high-risk inmates are often escorted individually by multiple guards. They are handcuffed and, in some cases, shackled when being transferred between different areas of the prison. For extremely dangerous inmates, even their time outside the cell is limited. Some are allowed only 1 hour per day for exercise, and that too in a small, enclosed yard under heavy surveillance. Any deviation from the routine must be approved by senior officers, ensuring that no inmate has the opportunity to create disruptions. Contraband prevention, no tolerance for smuggling. One of the biggest security challenges in any prison is preventing the smuggling of contraband, such as drugs, weapons, and mobile phones. Singapore takes a zero-tolerance approach, implementing multiple layers of screening to ensure nothing illegal enters the prison. All visitors, including family members, legal representatives, and even prison staff, must pass through strict security checks before entering the facility. Body scanners, metal detectors, and baggage x-ray machines are used to detect any hidden items. Inmates themselves are subjected to random body searches. Some high-risk prisoners may be strip-searched before and after visitations to prevent any attempt to hide contraband on their person. Mail and packages sent to inmates are thoroughly inspected. Letters are screened for coded messages or hidden materials, and parcels are opened and examined before being handed over. Any attempt to smuggle contraband results in severe consequences, including extended sentences, solitary confinement, or revocation of visitation rights. Highly trained prison officers and tactical response teams. The security of Singapore's maximum security prisons depends heavily on its prison officers, who undergo rigorous training before being assigned to these facilities. Officers are trained in self-defense and combat techniques to handle violent inmates and prevent riots. Crisis negotiation to manage conflicts, defuse tensions, and prevent escalation. Psychological training to understand inmate behavior and recognize signs of potential trouble. Apart from regular officers, there are special tactical response teams trained for emergencies. These elite units are equipped to handle riots, hostage situations, escape attempts, and violent outbursts. They undergo intensive training in handling high-risk situations and are always on standby in case of emergencies. Solitary confinement for high-risk offenders. For inmates who are too dangerous to be placed in the general prison population, solitary confinement is used as a control measure. In solitary, inmates are isolated in a small, soundproof cell with no contact with other prisoners. They have minimal human interaction and are only allowed out of their cell for extremely short, supervised periods. This measure is used to neutralize threats, prevent prison gang activities, and ensure that particularly violent individuals do not pose a risk to others. However, prison authorities monitor inmates in solitary confinement for signs of mental distress, providing psychological support when necessary. Intelligence and preventive measures against prison gangs. One of the major threats inside any prison is the formation of gangs that operate within the facility. Singapore's prison authorities work proactively to prevent the formation of criminal networks behind bars. Prison officers gather intelligence by monitoring inmate communications, analyzing behaviors, and identifying individuals who may attempt to organize illegal activities. Inmates suspected of gang involvement are separated, preventing them from recruiting others or continuing their criminal enterprises from inside the prison. Secret messages, coded language, or any sign of organized crime activity are investigated immediately. Strict punishments are imposed on those found engaging in such activities, further discouraging inmates from attempting to form underground networks. Zero tolerance for escape attempts. Escaping from a maximum security prison in Singapore is virtually impossible due to the extreme security measures in place. In addition to reinforced walls, biometric security, and constant surveillance, there are multiple layers of perimeter security. Electric fences and motion sensors to detect any unauthorized movement. Armed guards stationed at key points, ready to respond to any escape attempt. Controlled exit points with biometric verification, ensuring no one can leave without proper authorization. In Singapore's history, successful prison escapes are almost unheard of due to these strict measures. Any attempt to escape results in severe punishment, including extended sentences and solitary confinement. Conclusion. Singapore's maximum security prison system is one of the most secure in the world, combining technology, strict regulations, and highly trained personnel to ensure absolute control. Security is not just about preventing physical escapes. It also focuses on stopping internal crime networks, maintaining order, and rehabilitating inmates in a controlled environment. The system reflects Singapore's broader philosophy on law enforcement: efficiency, discipline, and zero tolerance for crime. Types of inmates in Singapore's maximum security prisons. Singapore's maximum security prisons house some of the most dangerous and high-risk criminals in the country. These individuals are classified based on the severity of their crimes, their potential threat to security, and their likelihood of rehabilitation. Unlike lower security prisons, where inmates may serve shorter sentences for lesser crimes, maximum security prisons are reserved for those whose offenses are considered a serious threat to society. The inmates in these facilities come from diverse backgrounds, but they share one common trait. Their crimes have led them to the highest level of incarceration in Singapore. To maintain order and security, inmates are categorized into different groups based on their crimes, behavior, and risk factors. 1. Violent offenders. One of the largest groups within maximum security prisons consists of violent offenders. Those convicted of crimes such as murder, armed robbery, assault, and aggravated violence. These individuals are considered dangerous due to their history of harming others, often with little regard for the law. Murderers. Those convicted of homicide, including premeditated murder, manslaughter, and contract killings, often serve life sentences or face the death penalty if found guilty of capital offenses. Gang-related violence. Many violent offenders have connections to criminal organizations, where they may have participated in turf wars, extortion, or retaliatory attacks. Repeat offenders. Some inmates have a history of violence and multiple convictions, making them highly unpredictable and difficult to rehabilitate. Violent offenders are usually kept under strict surveillance to prevent fights or attacks within the prison. Many are placed in solitary confinement or high-security cells to minimize risks to other inmates and staff. 2. Drug traffickers and narcotics offenders. Singapore has some of the strictest drug laws in the world, and individuals convicted of drug trafficking, manufacturing, or large-scale distribution often end up in maximum security prisons. The country's stance on drugs is uncompromising, with harsh penalties, including long prison sentences and the death penalty for major drug-related crimes. Major drug traffickers. Those caught smuggling large quantities of drugs such as heroin, methamphetamine, or cocaine. Singapore's laws impose mandatory death sentences for trafficking above certain thresholds. Drug lords and syndicate members. High-ranking individuals in organized drug networks who control or coordinate large-scale drug operations. Repeat drug offenders. Individuals who have been arrested multiple times for drug-related offenses and have failed to reform under previous rehabilitation programs. Maximum security prisons prevent these inmates from continuing their drug operations by cutting off communication with the outside world. Strict monitoring of visitors, phone calls, and mail prevents any criminal coordination from within the prison walls. 3. Terrorism and national security threats. A highly sensitive category of inmates includes those involved in terrorism, extremism, or activities that threaten Singapore's national security. These individuals are considered extremely dangerous, not just because of their past actions, but because of their potential influence over others. Terrorist suspects and convicts. Those linked to extremist groups, both local and international, who may have been involved in planning or executing attacks. Radicalized individuals. Inmates who have shown signs of ideological extremism and may attempt to radicalize others inside prison. Espionage and subversive activities. Individuals convicted of spying, treason, or working against the interests of the state. These inmates are often placed in solitary confinement or closely monitored to prevent any influence over other prisoners. Singapore's Internal Security Department, ISD, works closely with the prison system to rehabilitate and monitor such inmates, sometimes offering de-radicalization programs in an attempt to reintegrate them into society safely. 4. High-profile, white-collar criminals. While white-collar criminals are typically housed in lower security prisons, some high-profile offenders may be placed in maximum security facilities, especially if their crimes involved large-scale fraud, corruption, or financial crimes that severely impacted national stability. Corporate fraud and embezzlement. Business executives or officials convicted of large-scale financial fraud affecting banks, corporations, or even government institutions. Corrupt public officials. High-ranking government officials who have engaged in severe corruption, money laundering, or abuse of power. Cybercriminals. Individuals involved in large-scale hacking, identity theft, or digital fraud that compromised national security or financial institutions. Even though they may not be physically violent, these inmates are considered dangerous because of their ability to manipulate systems and people, making their incarceration in a controlled environment necessary. 5. Sexual offenders. Sexual crimes are taken very seriously in Singapore, and offenders convicted of rape, child sexual abuse, human trafficking, or other serious sexual offenses often end up in maximum security prisons. Repeat sexual predators. Individuals with multiple offenses who pose an ongoing danger to society. Sexual offenses against minors. Those convicted of crimes involving children often receive harsher sentences due to the severity of their actions. Human traffickers. Individuals involved in sexual exploitation, forced prostitution, or trafficking victims for illegal purposes. Sexual offenders are often isolated from the general prison population, as they are at high risk of being targeted by other inmates. Many undergo mandatory rehabilitation programs, including psychological counseling and therapy, as part of their sentence. 6. Escape risks and notorious criminals. Some inmates are classified as high risk due to their history of escape attempts, extreme violence, or notoriety. These individuals require extra security measures, including additional surveillance, stricter confinement, and limited movement within a prison. Escape convicts. Those who have previously broken out of custody or attempted to escape. High-profile criminals. Infamous individuals whose cases gained widespread media attention, making them a potential target inside prison. Extremely violent prisoners. Those who have attacked other inmates or guards during their incarceration. These prisoners are constantly monitored and often placed in solitary confinement to reduce security risks. Their interactions with others are limited, and they are under heavy guard during transfers or court appearances. 7. Foreign nationals and international criminals. Singapore's maximum security prisons also house foreign nationals convicted of serious crimes, including drug trafficking, organized crime, and human trafficking. These individuals may have been involved in transnational criminal activities and pose a risk to national security. International drug smugglers. Foreigners caught transporting or distributing narcotics within Singapore's borders. Members of international crime syndicates. Those linked to global criminal organizations such as the mafia, triads, or cartels. Human traffickers and smugglers. Individuals engaged in illegal immigration, modern slavery, or forced labor schemes. Foreign inmates are often monitored closely to prevent any external criminal influence. In some cases, they may be extradited to their home countries after serving part of their sentences. Categorization and risk assessment. Upon arrival, every inmate undergoes a detailed risk assessment to determine their threat level and placement within the prison system. Factors such as their crime, behavior, mental health, gang affiliations, and likelihood of rehabilitation are considered before assigning them to specific security levels. Some inmates may be placed in solitary confinement, while others may be assigned to strictly monitored rehabilitation programs. Regular evaluations are conducted to determine if an inmate's security classification should be adjusted based on their conduct and progress. Conclusion. The inmates in Singapore's maximum security prisons represent the most serious criminal offenders in the country. Whether violent criminals, drug traffickers, terrorists, or white-collar offenders, these individuals are kept under the highest level of security to protect both society and the prison environment itself. The categorization of inmates ensures that each prisoner is managed according to their risk level, balancing discipline with rehabilitation where possible. Rehabilitation and discipline in Singapore's maximum security prisons. Singapore's prison system is designed not only to punish offenders, but also to rehabilitate them whenever possible. However, in maximum security prisons, rehabilitation is a more complex and controlled process due to the nature of the inmates housed there. These individuals are often considered high risk, either because of their violent history, criminal affiliations, or their likelihood of reoffending. Therefore, the balance between rehabilitation and strict discipline is carefully maintained to ensure both security and the potential for reintegration into society. Rehabilitation in maximum security prisons focuses on behavioral correction, education, vocational training, and psychological support, while discipline is enforced through strict rules, surveillance, and zero-tolerance policies for misconduct. Together, these measures aim to prevent recidivism while maintaining a controlled and orderly prison environment. Strict discipline and behavioral control. Discipline is the foundation of Singapore's maximum security prison system. Without a firm structure, the environment could become dangerous, not just for inmates but also for prison staff. The rules inside the prison are non-negotiable, and every inmate is expected to comply without question. 1. Regulated daily routine. Inmates follow a highly structured daily schedule that leaves little room for deviation. This strict routine reduces idle time, which could otherwise lead to disorder or misconduct. That wake-up times, meals, work assignments, and exercise periods are all scheduled precisely. Inmates must follow orders without hesitation. Refusal to comply leads to punitive measures. Silence and obedience are expected. Loud or disruptive behavior is not tolerated. Every aspect of prison life is designed to eliminate unpredictability and minimize conflict, ensuring that inmates do not feel a sense of control over their environment. Zero tolerance for violence and gang activity. Violence, intimidation, or gang-related activities are strictly prohibited. Any inmate found engaging in such behavior faces severe consequences, which may include solitary confinement for extended periods, loss of privileges, such as visitation rights or access to recreational activities, increased security restrictions, including closer monitoring or transfer to a more restrictive section of the prison. Prison officers closely monitor inmate interactions to detect any signs of gang formation or criminal alliances. If inmates are suspected of conspiring to control illicit activities within the prison, they are immediately separated and placed under further restrictions. 3. Punishments for rule violations. Inmates who break prison rules face strict disciplinary action, which may include isolation and solitary confinement, where they're kept in a small cell with no interaction for up to 23 hours a day. Restrictions on privileges, such as loss of phone calls, books, or limited access to rehabilitation programs. Manual labor assignments, where they must engage in difficult physical tasks under strict supervision. Increased sentence duration, if the violation is serious enough to warrant additional legal action. These punishments serve as a deterrent, reinforcing the message that disobedience and violence will not be tolerated. Rehabilitation programs for inmates. Despite the strict discipline enforced in maximum security prisons, Singapore's prison system still prioritizes rehabilitation for those who show a willingness to reform. The aim is to prepare inmates for a possible return to society while ensuring they do not pose a continued threat. 1. Educational and vocational training. Education plays a key role in rehabilitation, giving inmates the skills needed to reintegrate into society after their release. Programs include basic literacy and education for those who lack formal schooling, vocational training in trades such as tailoring, carpentry, and metalwork, IT and digital skills programs for select inmates, helping them develop marketable skills, business and financial literacy courses, teaching inmates how to manage money and avoid financial crimes in the future. These programs reduce recidivism by providing inmates with legal employment opportunities upon release. 2. Psychological counseling and mental health support. Many inmates in maximum security prisons suffer from psychological trauma, anger issues, or emotional instability. Addressing these issues is crucial for rehabilitation. Counseling services include one-on-one therapy sessions with psychologists to address violent tendencies, addiction, or past trauma. Anger management programs for inmates with histories of violent outbursts. Mental health assessments to ensure that inmates are not suffering from extreme psychological distress due to their confinement. Singapore's prison system understands that some inmates require mental rehabilitation as much as they do behavioral correction, and the goal is to provide professional psychological support where needed. 3. Religious and moral guidance. For many inmates, spirituality and moral teachings play a role in their rehabilitation. Singapore's prison system allows religious representatives to conduct sessions for inmates based on their faith. These sessions aim to encourage self-reflection and remorse for their past crimes, teach moral responsibility and ethical behavior, provide emotional and spiritual support, particularly for inmates struggling with guilt or hopelessness. Religious guidance is voluntary, but many inmates choose to participate as part of their personal journey toward change. For restorative justice and family support programs, one of the most impactful aspects of rehabilitation is restorative justice, where inmates acknowledge the harm they have caused and work toward making amends. This includes letter writing programs, where inmates express remorse to their victims or families. Supervised meetings with victims, if the victim is willing, to promote understanding and closure. Family counseling sessions, allowing inmates to rebuild relationships with their loved ones. Family plays a crucial role in an inmate's successful rehabilitation. Inmates with strong family support systems have a higher chance of reforming and avoiding repeat offenses. Balancing rehabilitation with maximum security. While rehabilitation is an important goal, maximum security prisons prioritize safety and order above all else. This means that not all inmates qualify for rehabilitation programs. Violent repeat offenders, gang leaders, or high-risk individuals may have limited access. Programs are conducted under strict supervision to prevent inmates from manipulating the system. Progress is carefully monitored, and any sign of deceit or non-compliance can result in removal from rehabilitation efforts. For some inmates, rehabilitation is possible, while for others, their crimes and behaviors may make them a permanent security risk. Singapore's system recognizes this and ensures that only those who show genuine change are given the opportunity for reintegration. Conclusion: rehabilitation and discipline work together in Singapore's maximum security prisons. While the strict rules and punishments maintain order, the rehabilitation programs provide inmates with a chance to change. The effectiveness of this approach lies in its balance, offering second chances to those who earn them, while ensuring that Singapore's most dangerous criminals remain under tight control. Security measures and surveillance in Singapore's maximum security prisons. Singapore's maximum security prisons are designed to house the most dangerous criminals, including violent offenders, drug traffickers, terrorists, and individuals with extensive criminal networks. To prevent escapes, maintain order, and ensure the safety of both inmates and staff, the prison system employs some of the most advanced security measures and surveillance technologies in the world. Security in these prisons is not just about physical barriers. It involves layers of technology, intelligence gathering, strict protocols, and highly trained officers. Every aspect of the prison environment is meticulously controlled to minimize risks and prevent any form of criminal activity from taking place within the prison walls. 1. High-tech surveillance systems. One of the most critical aspects of maintaining security is the extensive surveillance infrastructure that monitors inmates 24/7. These surveillance systems are designed to detect even the smallest signs of rule-breaking, violence, or escape attempts. CCTV cameras. Thousands of high-definition cameras cover every inch of the prison, including cells, corridors, exercise yards, and common areas. These cameras provide real-time monitoring and are equipped with night vision and motion detection to ensure constant vigilance, even in low-light conditions. Facial recognition technology. Advanced AI-powered facial recognition systems track the movements of inmates and staff to ensure no unauthorized individuals are present in restricted areas. Smart sensors, pressure-sensitive flooring, infrared motion detectors, and heartbeat detection systems are installed in key locations to detect unauthorized movement or tunneling attempts. Restricted movement and controlled access. Inmates in maximum security prisons cannot move freely. Every movement, whether within their cell block or to a different facility within the prison, is strictly controlled and monitored. Electronic door systems. All doors within the prison are controlled electronically and can only be unlocked by authorized personnel. Each movement requires multiple layers of security clearance, preventing inmates from easily accessing other areas. Escort protocols. If an inmate needs to be transported within the prison, they are accompanied by multiple armed guards, often in restraints such as handcuffs, leg irons, or even waist chains. Restricted contact between inmates. Inmates are often separated based on their risk level, and those deemed particularly dangerous may have limited or no interaction with other prisoners. This level of restriction ensures that inmates cannot conspire, form gangs, or plan escapes. 3. Advanced perimeter security. The perimeter of a maximum security prison is designed to be impenetrable, preventing both escapes and unauthorized access from the outside. Multiple security barriers. The prison is surrounded by high concrete walls topped with razor wire and electrified fencing. In some areas, there are multiple layers of fencing, making it nearly impossible to scale or breach. Guard towers. Strategically placed watchtowers provide 360-degree visibility around the prison perimeter. Armed guards with high-power rifles are stationed in these towers at all times. Underground security. To prevent tunneling escape attempts, the prison's foundation is reinforced with thick concrete slabs and seismic sensors that detect any underground movement. Drone surveillance. Some prisons have started using drones equipped with night vision cameras to conduct aerial surveillance, further eliminating blind spots. These measures ensure that no one can enter or leave without authorization. 4. Cell security and inmate monitoring. Each cell in a maximum security prison is designed to prevent escape, contraband smuggling, and unauthorized communication. Reinforced steel doors. Individual cells are secured with tamper-proof, reinforced steel doors that can only be opened remotely by officers. Minimal furniture and fixtures. Cells are designed with basic, non-removable furniture to prevent inmates from using objects to fashion weapons or escape tools. Security checks and random inspections. Prison officers conduct random cell searches to look for contraband, such as hidden weapons, drugs, or unauthorized mobile phones. Body scanners and strip searches. To prevent contraband smuggling, inmates are subjected to routine strip searches and full body scans after visits or before being transferred to different areas of the prison. Every measure is designed to ensure that no inmate has the means to break out, harm others, or continue criminal activities from behind bars. 5. Special units for high-risk prisoners. Some inmates are classified as extremely high risk, either because of their history of violence, escape attempts, or influence over criminal networks. These prisoners are placed under specialized security measures. Solitary confinement. Inmates deemed a significant threat are kept in isolation for up to 23 hours a day, with minimal human contact. Supermax facilities. Some prisons have special units within a maximum security facility that house the most dangerous criminals. These units have extra thick walls, soundproofing, and even stricter surveillance. Psychological monitoring. High-risk inmates are constantly evaluated for signs of aggression, mental instability, or manipulation tactics. These measures ensure that the most dangerous prisoners remain fully controlled at all times. 6. Communication restrictions and prevention of criminal activity. One of the biggest security concerns in a maximum security prison is inmates continuing their criminal activities from behind bars. To prevent this, no internet or phone access. Inmates are not allowed to have phones or access the internet. Any communication is heavily restricted and monitored. Recorded and monitored visits. Any interaction between inmates and visitors is conducted behind glass partitions and recorded. Visits are limited and supervised, with officers listening in on conversations. Mail screening. All letters and packages sent to inmates are carefully examined to ensure that no coded messages, money, or contraband are being smuggled inside. Undercover intelligence operations. Prison authorities sometimes place undercover officers inside the prison to gather intelligence on inmates suspected of attempting to orchestrate illegal activities. These strict controls ensure that criminals cannot continue running their operations from within prison walls. 7. Highly trained prison officers and emergency response teams. Managing a maximum security prison requires officers who are highly trained in handling dangerous inmates, preventing riots, and responding to emergencies. Specialized riot control units. In the event of a riot or violent incident, special forces trained in riot control and hand-to-hand combat are deployed immediately. Quick response teams. Officers are trained to react within seconds to any security breach or violent altercation. Non-lethal and lethal weapons. Guards are equipped with tasers, batons, and, in extreme cases, firearms to handle dangerous situations. Psychological training. Officers undergo negotiation and conflict resolution training to de-escalate tense situations without resorting to force. The presence of highly trained personnel ensures that the prison remains under strict control at all times. Balancing security and rehabilitation. While the primary goal of maximum security prisons is to contain and control the most dangerous criminals, Singapore's system also aims to rehabilitate inmates where possible. Security measures are carefully designed to allow for rehabilitation programs while ensuring that no risks are taken. Even inmates who qualify for education, therapy, or work programs are still closely monitored, ensuring that security is never compromised. Life inside a maximum security prison. The harsh reality of daily existence. Life inside Singapore's maximum security prison is a world of extreme discipline, isolation, and control, where every aspect of an inmate's life is dictated by strict rules. For those confined within these high-security walls, the outside world becomes a distant memory, and survival depends on adapting to the rigid routine, obeying orders, and avoiding trouble. Unlike lower security prisons, where inmates might have more opportunities for social interaction and rehabilitation, maximum security facilities are designed primarily for containment and strict supervision. The daily existence of an inmate here is defined by routine, surveillance, limited human interaction, and an absence of personal freedom. A strict, unforgiving daily routine. Inmates in maximum security prisons live by a strict schedule that leaves little room for personal choice or autonomy. Every day follows an almost identical pattern, ensuring absolute control and minimal opportunities for misconduct. Wake-up time is early, often around 5:30 or 6 a.m., with no exceptions. Inmates must get out of bed immediately and prepare for the day. Meals are served at designated times: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Food is simple and nutritionally balanced, but lacks variety. Inmates do not get to choose their meals. Exercise time is strictly limited, usually no more than 1 hour a day, and often in an enclosed yard where surveillance is constant. Work assignments or educational programs are part of the schedule for those deemed eligible, but these activities occur under heavy supervision. Lights out is enforced early, typically by 9 o'clock or 10 p.m., and any noise or movement after this time is strictly prohibited. This rigid structure is designed to eliminate unpredictability, reducing the chances of violence or rebellion while reinforcing absolute obedience. 2. The isolation of solitary confinement. For inmates who break prison rules or are considered too dangerous for general population housing, solitary confinement is a reality. These small, barren cells are designed to strip inmates of any control over their environment, reinforcing the power of the system over them. Inmates in solitary spend up to 23 hours a day in total isolation, with only an hour of exercise in a similarly confined space. Cells are bare and minimalistic, often containing nothing more than a sleeping mat, a toilet, and a small shelf for personal items. There is no access to television, reading material, or any form of entertainment. The only sounds an inmate hears are their own movements and the distant echoes of other prisoners. Meals are passed through a small slot in the door, with minimal human interaction. Solitary confinement can take a severe toll on an inmate's mental and emotional well-being, with some prisoners experiencing severe anxiety, depression, or psychological breakdowns due to prolonged isolation. However, prison authorities see it as a necessary tool for maintaining order. 3. The harsh reality of limited human contact. One of the most challenging aspects of life in a maximum security prison is the lack of meaningful human interaction. Inmates spend most of their time alone or under strict supervision, with few opportunities for socializing. Conversations between inmates are often restricted or monitored, ensuring they cannot form alliances or conspire against prison staff. Family visits are limited, sometimes to just 1 or 2 visits per month, and they take place under heavy security, often with glass barriers separating the inmate from their loved ones. Letters and phone calls, if allowed, are heavily monitored, and any suspicious communication is intercepted. Inmates in solitary confinement experience even greater isolation, going weeks or months without speaking to another person. This level of social deprivation is meant to prevent criminal activity inside the prison, but also contributes to the psychological struggles many inmates face. 4. The constant presence of surveillance. Privacy does not exist in a maximum security prison. Inmates are constantly watched, monitored, and controlled through an extensive surveillance system. CCTV cameras cover every inch of the facility, including cells, hallways, and exercise yards. There are no blind spots. Random cell inspections take place frequently to prevent inmates from hiding contraband or engaging in illegal activities. Body searches are a routine part of prison life, with inmates being strip searched before and after visits or whenever they move to a different part of the facility. Listening devices and AI-powered monitoring systems are used to detect coded language or suspicious conversations between inmates. This level of surveillance ensures that inmates cannot organize escape attempts, smuggle contraband, or commit acts of violence without being detected. 5. The harsh conditions of incarceration. Unlike lower security prisons that may offer more privileges, life in a maximum security facility is designed to be difficult and austere. Cell conditions are basic, with only the bare essentials for survival. There are no personal items beyond what is strictly permitted. Temperature control is minimal, meaning inmates must endure extreme heat or cold, depending on the season. Noise levels vary, but some inmates find the constant clanking of metal doors, distant shouts, and occasional alarms to be psychologically exhausting. There is no freedom of movement. Every action is dictated by prison officials, and stepping outside one's assigned area without permission results in immediate punishment. These conditions serve as a deterrent to crime while reinforcing absolute state control over inmates. 6. The struggle for mental and emotional survival. Many inmates in maximum security prisons suffer from extreme stress, anxiety, or psychological disorders due to the harsh environment. The constant isolation, surveillance, and lack of control over their lives take a heavy toll. Depression and hopelessness are common among inmates, particularly those serving long or life sentences. Aggression and violence can manifest as inmates struggle to cope with their situation. Suicidal tendencies are a major concern, and prison staff must monitor high-risk inmates closely to prevent self-harm. To address these issues, some inmates receive psychological counseling or therapy, but access is limited, and many must endure their struggles alone. 7. The fear of violence and reprisals. While security measures are in place to prevent violence, maximum security prisons can still be dangerous environments. Fights and altercations can occur, especially between inmates with previous gang affiliations or personal conflicts. Punishment for violence is severe, often resulting in extended solitary confinement or loss of privileges. Prison staff use force if necessary, deploying riot squads and specialized units to quell any sign of rebellion or disorder. Despite these dangers, many inmates learn to adapt to prison life, keeping to themselves and following the rules to avoid trouble. 8. The reality of long sentences and no escape. For many inmates in maximum security prisons, the harshest reality is the knowledge that they may never leave. Some are serving life sentences, knowing they will die behind bars. Others have sentences so long that release is a distant dream. The parole process is extremely strict, and only a few inmates are ever granted early release. This psychological weight can be one of the most challenging aspects of life inside a maximum security prison, forcing inmates to either accept their fate or fight to survive mentally and emotionally. For inmates serving long sentences in Singapore's maximum security prisons, the passage of time becomes their greatest tormentor. Unlike those in lower security facilities who might have the hope of parole, reintegration, or a second chance at life, many prisoners in maximum security institutions face the grim reality of spending decades, or even the rest of their lives, behind bars. The weight of a lengthy or life sentence is an unbearable burden for many inmates, as they come to terms with the fact that their days, weeks, months, and years will be spent confined to the same space, following the same rigid routine, with no chance of freedom. This realization has a profound psychological effect, leading to hopelessness, regret, mental deterioration, and in some cases, complete emotional numbness. 1. The initial shock of sentencing. For many inmates, the moment the judge announces their long-term or life sentence is the moment their world collapses. Some break down in tears, others lash out in anger, while some remain in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the reality of spending the next 30, 40, or 50 years in prison. Denial and disbelief are common in the early stages. Many prisoners hold on to the hope of an appeal or a legal loophole that could overturn their sentence. Anxiety and panic attacks set in as they realize what a life behind bars truly means. Losing their family, missing out on life milestones, and growing old in a prison cell. Some inmates enter a state of emotional shutdown, unable to process the sheer enormity of their punishment. In the first few weeks and months, these emotions are raw and overwhelming, and many prisoners struggle to find meaning in their new reality. 2. The slow, relentless passage of time. Inside prison, time does not move at the same pace as the outside world. Days feel like weeks, weeks feel like months, and years feel like an eternity. Every day is a monotonous cycle of waking up, eating, working, if allowed, exercising, and sleeping. There are no vacations, no variety, and no change of scenery. The only events that mark the passing of time are prison milestones, the completion of a year, a decade, or a significant personal date that reminds an inmate of the world they lost. Unlike the outside world, where new opportunities arise, technology advances, and life progresses, prisoners remain trapped in an unchanging environment. Over time, many inmates develop a distorted perception of time, where days blur into one another, making it difficult to differentiate between the past, present, and future. 3. Watching the world move on without them. One of the most painful aspects of serving a long sentence is knowing that life continues outside the prison walls, without them. Family members grow older, children become adults, and loved ones pass away. Inmates miss out on birthdays, weddings, funerals, and milestones that they will never experience firsthand. Some prisoners receive visits and letters in the early years, but as time passes, contact with the outside world begins to fade. Friends move on, relationships end, and even family members lose touch. For those serving life sentences, this separation is permanent. The world they once knew no longer exists, and by the time they're eligible for release, if ever, society may be completely unrecognizable. 4. The mental and emotional deterioration. As the years go by, the psychological toll of a long sentence becomes unbearable for many inmates. Depression and suicidal thoughts are common among prisoners who see no purpose in their existence. Some inmates develop institutionalized behavior, becoming completely dependent on the prison system and losing the ability to function outside of it. Others experience cognitive decline, struggling with memory loss, reduced decision-making skills, and the inability to engage in deep conversations or problem-solving. Extreme boredom and mental stagnation lead to a lack of motivation, making it difficult for prisoners to engage in rehabilitative programs or self-improvement activities. Many long-term inmates lose their sense of identity, no longer recognizing themselves as the people they were before prison. 5. The reality of growing old behind bars. A long sentence does not only affect the mind, it also takes a toll on the body. Inmates who enter prison in their 20s or 30s eventually find themselves growing old in their prison cells, facing the harsh realities of aging behind bars. Health problems become more common, and medical care in prison is often limited or basic. Loss of physical strength and mobility makes daily life more difficult, especially in a place that does not cater to the elderly. Elderly inmates often have no family or support system, meaning they must rely entirely on prison staff for their care. Some prisoners eventually become so frail and weak that they are transferred to specialized prison units for elderly inmates, where they spend their final years before dying behind bars. For those serving life without parole, the knowledge that they will die in prison, never to experience freedom again, is a burden few can bear. 6. The hope for clemency or early release. Despite the despair that comes with long sentences, some inmates cling to the hope of an early release. However, in Singapore's strict legal system, this is rare. Parole is not guaranteed, and prisoners must meet strict conditions to be considered for early release. Those convicted of serious crimes such as murder, terrorism, or high-level drug trafficking often have no chance of clemency. Some inmates try to demonstrate good behavior and participate in rehabilitation programs, hoping this will improve their chances of early release. Others pin their hopes on legal appeals or policy changes, even though such changes rarely occur. For many, however, this hope is a false one, and they are eventually forced to accept their fate. 7. The different ways inmates cope. Faced with the crushing reality of a long or life sentence, inmates adopt different coping mechanisms. Some become deeply religious, finding solace in faith and spirituality. Others turn to education or self-improvement, learning new skills or studying topics of interest. A few become mentors to younger inmates, offering guidance and wisdom. Many simply shut down emotionally, going through the motions of prison life without engaging in anything meaningful. Some prisoners develop self-destructive behaviors, getting involved in fights, harming themselves, or lashing out in frustration. How an inmate copes with their sentence often determines their mental survival. Those who find purpose, even in small ways, fare better than those who succumb to despair. 8. The unavoidable end for many, dying in prison. For many inmates with life sentences, the ultimate reality is that they will never walk free again. Some die of old age, spending decades behind bars before passing away in prison. Others succumb to illness, with little access to advanced medical treatment. A few take their own lives, unable to cope with the endless years of confinement. In the end, the prison becomes their final resting place, and their stories fade into the records of the justice system, remembered only by a few. One of the biggest debates surrounding maximum security prisons in Singapore and around the world is the balance between punishment and rehabilitation. Should these prisons focus solely on deterring crime through harsh conditions, or should they also provide opportunities for inmates to change, learn, and reintegrate into society? In a system designed to hold the most dangerous offenders, murderers, drug traffickers, and violent criminals, is rehabilitation even possible, or is it just an illusion? For decades, Singapore's approach to crime and punishment has been rooted in strict laws, severe sentences, and zero tolerance for criminal activity. The country's reputation for low crime rates and strong legal enforcement is largely built on deterrence-based policies, where criminals know that if they break the law, they will face extreme consequences. However, over the years, discussions about the importance of rehabilitation, even for serious offenders, have emerged. Some argue that prisoners, even those in maximum security facilities, should be given the chance to reform, learn new skills, and work towards redemption. Others believe that the primary purpose of maximum security prisons is to punish, not rehabilitate, and that those who have committed severe crimes do not deserve a second chance. 1. The purpose of maximum security prisons: containment over rehabilitation. Singapore's maximum security prisons are designed to hold the most dangerous and high-risk individuals, meaning that their primary purpose is containment rather than rehabilitation. Security is the top priority, and every policy is designed to prevent violence, escapes, and disorder rather than to encourage personal growth. The structure of daily life is rigid, with little flexibility for inmates to engage in educational or vocational programs. Access to rehabilitation programs is limited, with only a small number of inmates being eligible for certain programs based on behavior, sentence length, and security risk. In many cases, prisoners are simply warehoused, kept behind bars for decades without the opportunity to change or grow. Some argue that this is necessary for public safety, while others believe it creates an endless cycle of criminality and hopelessness. 2. Strict sentencing laws and their impact on rehabilitation. One of the biggest barriers to rehabilitation in maximum security prisons is Singapore's strict sentencing laws, which leave little room for flexibility or early release. Inmates convicted of drug trafficking, violent crimes, or murder often receive long sentences with no possibility of parole. Singapore enforces the mandatory death penalty for certain drug-related offenses, meaning rehabilitation is not even an option for some offenders. Caning is used as a form of corporal punishment, reinforcing a system that prioritizes deterrence through physical pain rather than reform. Unlike other countries where inmates may have the chance to earn reduced sentences through good behavior or participation in programs, Singapore's system is much stricter, making it harder for inmates to work towards early release. This harsh sentencing structure raises the question: if inmates have no hope of release, what motivation do they have to change? 3. The psychological barriers to rehabilitation. Even when rehabilitation programs are available, many inmates struggle to participate due to the psychological effects of long-term incarceration. Hopelessness and depression prevent inmates from engaging in educational or vocational programs. Long-term isolation and strict control reduce an inmate's ability to function in a normal social environment, making it difficult for them to benefit from rehabilitation. Some inmates resist change, believing that their criminal identity is permanent and that there is no point in trying to reform. Others have been in the system for so long that they no longer understand how the outside world works, making reintegration nearly impossible. For rehabilitation to be successful, inmates must believe in the possibility of change, but in a system focused on punishment, many lose this belief entirely. 4. Limited access to educational and vocational programs. While Singapore has some rehabilitation programs, their availability in maximum security prisons is limited due to strict security protocols. Education programs exist, but only for certain inmates, those who have shown good behavior and are considered low risk. Vocational training is available in some cases, but options are limited and controlled by the prison authorities. Inmates who do have access to these programs often find them restrictive and highly monitored, limiting their effectiveness. For many maximum security inmates, these programs are out of reach, leaving them with little to do but wait out their sentences with no opportunities for growth or learning. 5. Religious and psychological rehabilitation efforts. Some of the most accessible rehabilitation efforts in maximum security prisons come in the form of religious and psychological support programs. Religious counseling is offered to inmates who seek spiritual guidance, often helping them find peace and purpose. Psychological therapy is available for those struggling with mental health issues, though access is limited. Group counseling sessions are occasionally conducted, focusing on anger management, coping strategies, and behavioral change. While these programs can be beneficial, they're often not enough to fully rehabilitate an inmate, especially when they're only available to a select few. 6. the debate over rehabilitation for serious offenders. One of the biggest controversies surrounding rehabilitation in maximum security prisons is whether serious offenders deserve a second chance. Some argue that murderers, violent criminals, and major drug traffickers should never be released, regardless of how much they reform. Others believe that even the worst offenders should have the opportunity to change and contribute to society in a meaningful way. The public perception of crime and punishment also plays a role. Many people in Singapore support strict laws and severe sentences, making it politically difficult to expand rehabilitation programs. This ongoing debate shapes how prisons operate and influences whether rehabilitation is truly prioritized or simply used as a symbolic effort. 7. The role of prison staff in rehabilitation. Prison officers play a crucial role in the success or failure of rehabilitation programs. Some officers believe in rehabilitation and try to encourage inmates to change. Others see inmates as irredeemable criminals and do not support reform efforts. The level of staff support can determine whether an inmate engages with rehabilitation or remains trapped in a cycle of criminal thinking. In a high-security environment where discipline is the top priority, finding a balance between control and rehabilitation is a constant struggle. 8. The challenge of reintegration for long-term inmates. For the few maximum security inmates who do get released, reintegration into society is one of the biggest challenges they face. Many have no family or support system, making it difficult to find housing and employment. Employers are hesitant to hire former criminals, especially those with serious offenses on their record. Readjusting to modern society can be overwhelming, particularly for inmates who have spent decades behind bars. The stigma of being an ex-convict follows them wherever they go, limiting their opportunities for a fresh start. Without proper reintegration support, many fall back into crime, leading to high recidivism rates among those who manage to leave prison. 9. The future of rehabilitation in Singapore's maximum security prisons. As global attitudes towards incarceration evolve, Singapore faces a critical question. Should its maximum security prisons continue to focus primarily on punishment and deterrence, or should they invest more in rehabilitation and second chances? While the government has introduced some rehabilitation efforts, the reality remains that maximum security prisons prioritize containment over reform. Whether this approach will change in the future remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. For many inmates, the chance at true rehabilitation remains out of reach. Solitary confinement is one of the most controversial aspects of Singapore's maximum security prison system. Used as both a punishment for rule violations and a means of controlling high-risk inmates, it is designed to enforce discipline and prevent violence within the prison. However, solitary confinement is also one of the harshest forms of incarceration, with severe psychological and emotional consequences. Prison authorities argue that solitary confinement is a necessary tool to maintain order. In maximum security prisons, where inmates include violent offenders, gang members, and those with a history of disruptive behavior, the use of solitary confinement is seen as an essential measure to prevent fights, attacks on officers, and riots. By isolating high-risk individuals, the prison system ensures that they do not pose a threat to others. On the other hand, human rights organizations and psychologists argue that solitary confinement is a form of psychological torture, especially when inmates are subjected to it for prolonged periods. The impact of extreme isolation can lead to mental health deterioration, emotional breakdowns, and even suicidal thoughts, raising serious ethical concerns. 1. What solitary confinement looks like in Singapore's maximum security prisons. Solitary confinement in Singapore's prisons is known for being strict, harsh, and mentally exhausting. Inmates placed in solitary confinement experience complete isolation in a small, windowless cell for 23 hours a day, with little to no human interaction. Minimal furnishings, often just a hard concrete bed, a toilet, and little else. Limited access to reading material, exercise, or even fresh air, making each day feel endlessly repetitive. No personal belongings, leaving inmates without any connection to the outside world. Strict food rations, often reduced as a further disciplinary measure. The cell itself is designed to break a prisoner's spirit, ensuring total control over their physical and mental state. Many inmates describe it as the worst punishment they have ever endured, far worse than the general prison population. 2. Why inmates are placed in solitary confinement. There are several reasons why an inmate in a maximum security prison might end up in solitary confinement. These include violent behavior. Attacking fellow inmates or prison staff is one of the most common reasons for solitary confinement. Possession of contraband. Inmates caught with weapons, drugs, or banned items can be placed in isolation. Gang-related activities. If an inmate is suspected of organizing gang activity within the prison, solitary confinement is used to break their influence. Escape attempts. Any attempt to escape results in immediate isolation. Repeated rule violations. Persistent disobedience, disrespect to officers, or breaking prison regulations can also lead to solitary confinement. In some cases, inmates are placed in protective solitary confinement, not as punishment but for their own safety. This applies to prisoners who are targeted by gangs, informants, or those with enemies inside the prison. 3. The psychological effects of long-term solitary confinement. One of the most disturbing aspects of solitary confinement is its severe psychological impact on inmates. Research has shown that prolonged isolation can lead to severe anxiety and paranoia, as inmates become hyper-aware of their surroundings. Hallucinations and delusions, due to the lack of external stimuli. Depression and suicidal thoughts, as inmates feel abandoned and hopeless. Loss of a sense of time, where days blur into each other, making it impossible to track the passing of weeks or months. Cognitive decline, including memory problems, difficulty concentrating, and an inability to process thoughts clearly. Emotional numbness or rage, where some inmates completely shut down emotionally while others develop extreme aggression. Many inmates who spend long periods in solitary confinement struggle to reintegrate into normal prison life, let alone society. Some never fully recover, and the effects of isolation can last long after their sentence is over. 4. The physical impact of solitary confinement. Solitary confinement doesn't just affect the mind, it also takes a toll on the body. Because inmates spend 23 hours a day in a confined space, they experience muscle deterioration due to lack of movement and exercise, poor sleep caused by the lack of natural light, and a disrupted sleep cycle, weakened immune system, making them more vulnerable to illness, headaches, dizziness, and digestive issues as a result of stress and inadequate nutrition, increased sensitivity to light and sound, which makes reintegration even more difficult. Over time, these physical symptoms combine with mental deterioration, creating a state where inmates feel completely broken, both physically and psychologically. 5. The use of solitary confinement as a control tactic. Beyond punishment, solitary confinement is also used as a tool of control within the prison system. Prison authorities use it to break the influence of gang leaders by cutting them off from their followers, force compliance among difficult prisoners, making them more obedient, instill fear in the general prison population, ensuring that inmates follow the rules to avoid solitary confinement. This method is effective in maintaining order, but it also raises ethical questions about whether breaking a person's spirit is a justifiable way to enforce discipline. 6. The debate: is solitary confinement justified or inhumane? The use of solitary confinement in Singapore's maximum security prisons remains a highly debated issue. On one side, prison authorities argue that it is necessary to maintain safety and order in a facility housing violent offenders. It prevents dangerous inmates from causing harm to others or attempting escapes. It reinforces discipline, deterring other inmates from breaking the rules. On the other side, critics, including psychologists and human rights organizations, argue that solitary confinement causes long-term psychological harm that is worse than the original crime committed. It is a form of psychological torture, violating basic human rights. It does not actually rehabilitate inmates, and in many cases, it makes them worse. This debate continues to shape prison policies and human rights discussions in Singapore and across the world. 7. Alternatives to solitary confinement. A more humane approach? Given the severe consequences of solitary confinement, some argue that alternative disciplinary methods should be explored. Possible alternatives include increased supervision instead of isolation, allowing problem inmates to be monitored without total isolation. Psychological intervention rather than punishment, helping inmates address the root causes of their behavior. Restorative justice programs, where inmates take responsibility for their actions instead of being locked away in isolation. Modified confinement, where inmates are separated but still allowed controlled interaction with others. While these alternatives may be more humane, implementing them in a maximum security environment poses significant challenges. Prison authorities remain skeptical of loosening restrictions, especially for the most dangerous offenders. 8. The future of solitary confinement in Singapore's prisons. As international pressure to reform prison practices grows, some countries have begun limiting or abolishing the use of solitary confinement. The question remains, will Singapore follow suit? With its strict criminal justice system, Singapore has been slow to adopt changes regarding solitary confinement. However, as research continues to highlight the devastating effects of isolation, there may be future reforms aimed at reducing its use or modifying its conditions. For now, solitary confinement remains one of the harshest and most feared punishments in Singapore's maximum security prisons, pushing inmates to their mental and physical limits. Technology has transformed every aspect of modern life, and maximum security prisons are no exception. In Singapore, where security is the top priority, cutting-edge technology plays a crucial role in monitoring, controlling, and managing the most dangerous inmates. From facial recognition and biometric scanning to AI-powered surveillance systems and automated inmate tracking, prisons today are more advanced than ever before. But as prisons become increasingly high-tech, ethical concerns arise. How much surveillance is too much? Does constant monitoring violate an inmate's basic rights? And is there a point where technology crosses the line from enhancing security to dehumanizing prisoners? This ongoing debate raises important questions about the balance between security, rehabilitation, and human dignity in Singapore's maximum security prisons. 1. High-tech surveillance, watching every move. One of the most advanced aspects of modern maximum security prisons is surveillance technology, which allows authorities to monitor inmates at all times. Singapore's prisons are equipped with AI-powered CCTV cameras that track movements and analyze inmate behavior in real time. Facial recognition systems that instantly identify prisoners, reducing the risk of identity fraud or escapes. Motion sensors and infrared scanners to detect unauthorized movement, even in low-light conditions. Microphones and audio surveillance that can pick up suspicious conversations and alert prison staff. This level of surveillance ensures that no activity goes unnoticed, making it nearly impossible for inmates to hide contraband, plan escapes, or engage in violence. However, inmates are constantly aware that they are being watched, which can have a profound psychological effect. Some prisoners report feeling stripped of all privacy, unable to have even a moment of solitude. Others describe the experience as living under a microscope, where even the smallest action is monitored and analyzed. For prison authorities, this is exactly the point. Constant surveillance acts as a deterrent, discouraging inmates from breaking the rules. But for critics, this raises a troubling question. If a person is watched 24/7, do they truly remain human, or do they become just another data point in a vast surveillance system? 2. Biometric identification, eliminating human error. Gone are the days when prisons relied solely on manual record-keeping and ID badges to track inmates. In Singapore's maximum security facilities, biometric technology has revolutionized identification and security processes. Some of the most commonly used biometric systems include fingerprint scanning, ensuring that only authorized individuals have access to specific areas. Retina and iris scanning, making it impossible for inmates to impersonate someone else. Voice recognition technology, used for secure phone calls and communication monitoring. These advancements have reduced human error, ensuring that identity mix-ups, security breaches, and unauthorized access are virtually eliminated. However, biometric data collection has also raised privacy concerns. Once an inmate's fingerprints, facial features, and voice patterns are stored in the system, how long does the government retain that data? Could it be used against them even after they are released? And does an inmate ever truly regain their privacy after leaving prison? For now, biometric technology remains a powerful tool for security, but its long-term implications, especially regarding data privacy, are still debated. One of the most groundbreaking technologies in modern prisons is AI-powered predictive analytics, which uses machine learning to analyze inmate behavior and predict potential security threats before they happen. AI can track patterns of movement, communication, and social interactions to identify possible conflicts. Behavioral analysis software can detect signs of agitation, stress, or aggression, alerting officers before an incident occurs. Predictive models can assess an inmate's likelihood of violence or escape attempts, allowing authorities to take preventive action. This technology aims to increase safety and reduce violence, creating a prison environment that is more controlled and less reactive. But can an algorithm truly predict human behavior? Some argue that AI lacks context and human judgment, leading to false positives that could unfairly punish certain inmates. Others worry about racial, social, or psychological profiling, where an algorithm may unfairly target certain groups based on biased data. Despite these concerns, Singapore's prisons continue to embrace AI as a tool for risk assessment, using it to refine inmate management strategies and prevent violence before it starts. 4. Automated prison cells. The future of inmate control. Singapore's prisons are increasingly using automated systems to control daily inmate routines, reducing direct human interaction and minimizing security risks. Some of these automation features include remote control doors, eliminating the need for officers to manually unlock and lock cells. Automated lighting and climate control, ensuring inmates experience structured day and night cycles. Self-service kiosks, where prisoners can submit requests, schedule visits, or check prison regulations without needing to speak to staff. Robotic patrol units, which assist officers in monitoring corridors and detecting contraband. While automation improves efficiency and security, it also raises ethical concerns. As human interactions decrease, inmates may begin to feel more like objects in a machine rather than people in a rehabilitation system. The absence of human contact can exacerbate loneliness, depression, and social isolation, making reintegration into society even harder. Even beyond prison walls, technology plays a role in monitoring ex-convicts and parolees. Some of the most common methods include GPS ankle monitors, which track movements and ensure compliance with parole conditions. Smartphone monitoring apps, allowing authorities to check an ex-inmate's location, behavior, and online activity. AI-powered risk assessment, which predicts whether a former inmate is likely to reoffend based on their habits. These systems help prevent repeat offenses, but they also bring up questions of privacy and human rights. If a person has served their time, should they still be watched and tracked? At what point does security turn into lifelong surveillance? 6. The ethical dilemma: security versus human rights. The biggest debate surrounding technology in prisons is whether it prioritizes security at the cost of human dignity. Critics argue that excessive surveillance dehumanizes inmates, reducing them to mere data points. Biometric data collection raises privacy concerns, as personal information may be stored indefinitely. Automation limits human contact, making rehabilitation and emotional recovery harder. Predictive AI may reinforce biases, unfairly targeting certain groups based on flawed data. On the other hand, supporters argue that technology prevents crime and violence, ensuring maximum security prisons remain safe. AI and biometrics reduce human error, making the system more efficient. Surveillance acts as a deterrent, discouraging inmates from engaging in illegal activities. Ultimately, the question remains, where is the line between effective prison management and invasive control? 7. The future of prison technology. What's next? As technology continues to advance, maximum security prisons will become even more high-tech. Some possible future innovations include AI-powered rehabilitation programs, using virtual reality, VR, and machine learning to guide inmates toward positive behavioral changes. Neural monitoring technology, which could analyze an inmate's brain activity to predict violent impulses. Fully automated prisons, where robots handle security, food distribution, and monitoring without human staff. While these innovations could improve efficiency and security, they also raise new ethical challenges. Will future prisons become high-tech correctional facilities, or will they turn into dystopian surveillance machines? Singapore's prison technology revolution is already underway, but whether it will ultimately help or harm the rehabilitation process remains an open question. The unfinished debate on justice and redemption. Singapore's maximum security prisons stand at the crossroads of punishment and rehabilitation, reflecting a justice system that is both unyielding in its discipline and measured in its efforts to reform. While the nation's strict approach has maintained one of the lowest crime rates in the world, the question remains, is a prison's true purpose to punish, or should it also seek to rebuild lives? For some inmates, prison is a final destination, a place where their crimes catch up to them, and their future is sealed behind reinforced steel doors. For others, it is a harsh but necessary turning point, an opportunity, however difficult, to break free from their past and find a new path forward. As technology advances, as laws evolve, and as society continues to debate the balance between justice and mercy, one thing remains certain. Maximum security prisons are more than just places of confinement. They are a reflection of what a nation believes about crime, punishment, and the possibility of redemption.